And again, I'm glad to see all of you here today. It's terrific. I wonder who iPhone is. But anyway, so I will unmute. Wait a minute. It looks like people might be unmuted anyway. And let's see. Let's go down here. Whoops. There's nothing about unmuting anybody, so I'm just wondering if you are unmuted as already, or if you can unmute yourselves. Shotai, you want to take a look at this and text me what seems like the situation? Because again, I only see a mute all, I don't see an unmute all. So I'm assuming that therefore you may not be muted. Okay, wait a minute, let's allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay, I think you're unmuted. So Shotai, you're on.
Yeah, you got, everybody's unmuted now.
Okay, great. Can you, well, do we have any questions?
I have a question, which I got to find it now, from Steve. He says, when the universe is annihilated, it remains indestructible. There's a word there that he probably meant to say something else, but I think it's, anyway, from
that's a question.
on Huineng. Can Roshi please comment on this?
Okay. There's a koan in which a monk asks the master, does everything, when the kalpa ending conflagration comes, is everything destroyed? And the teacher says, yes. And the monk says, is even it destroyed? And the teacher says, yes, it is even destroyed. So, no, is this what you're talking about, Steve?
You're unmuted here, Steve.
No, it was a, yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
It was a teisha that I was listening to on Wei Nang, and basically it was a line that said, when the universe is annihilated, it remains indestructible.
Yeah, and no, both. Sorry. Does the dog have the Buddha nature? No. Does the dog have the Buddha nature? Yes. It's a wonderful koan. And it's something that, people keep hanging on to. When the conflagration ends the kalpa, which sounds like it's getting closer, am I going to disappear? People have an idea that I'll die, but I'll really be around. And in one sense, that's true, and in another sense, it's not, because who we ever thought we were is gone. But the energy that fuels this body in life cannot disappear. It is transformed, but it cannot disappear. But people still try to hang on to this idea that there's a soul that is indestructible.
Also, part of meditation is to discover that it for yourself.
Absolutely. No question about it. Yeah. Yeah.
We have,
Uh,
we have,
hang on just a second. At Hidden Valley Zen Center, there is a scroll that was done by one of the Kansho of Myoshinji. Kansho is the head abbot of Myoshinji, which is a Rinzai headquarters temple, but it's an enormous complex. It's 44 temples altogether, because when people were, it's very, very old. It goes from centuries, and as monks were authorized to teach, they built their little temple right there, and so it ended up with 44 different temples. But anyway, this Kansho wrote this scroll in Japanese characters, of course, and it reads, although the 8 winds may blow, it is not destroyed. Now, the 8 winds are all the different feelings that we can have. You know, hatred and frustration and joy and all the rest. What is this it? What is this it? But be careful that you don't conceive of this it as anything permanent. And that's quite a conundrum, yeah?
Yeah.
Go for it, Steve.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
we have about 3 more questions here. So
Sure.
from Jay to everyone, thank you for a wonderful and inspirational teaching. I have practiced mindfulness for many years, but I am new to Zen practice. What is a koan and how does one get started practicing with it?
Okay. A koan, there's different kinds of koans. The classic teaching method in Rinzai Zen is that there are a series of breakthrough koans, they call them. This is, you may actually have heard of them. One is this one that I mentioned a minute ago, which is, does the dog have the Buddha nature? It goes back to Tang Dynasty China, and Zhou, who was a deeply realized master. And a monk asked Zhou, does even a dog have the Buddha nature? Now, you have to understand the Chinese culture of the era to understand why that is such a big deal question. And that is that in our culture, who would even ask the question? Because dogs, unless you were bitten by one as a kid and are terrified of them, in general, dogs are puppy dogs and pets, and lots of dogs. Lots of people have dogs. Well, in China, they're considered pretty despicable. When I was living in Burma, the dogs also were considered similarly, and they were all wild dogs because nobody had pet dogs, and they scavenged, and they were thought, when somebody was ill in a village, they would put special food on a tray, put it out on the outskirts of the village to entice the evil spirits away from the person and allow them to heal, and those dogs would eat the food. So they were considered pretty wretched, and they were pretty wretched, mangy animals full of scabies and worms and all kinds of stuff, and rabies too, for that matter. But that's how it was in China in that era. So this monk obviously had some ideas about the elite image of Buddha nature, and was sure that a dog couldn't have it. And Joshu said no, because mu means no. Another time, a monk asked the same master the same question, and he said wu, which means yes. So how can a dog have and not have the Buddha nature at the same time? And that has become more or less the primary breakthrough koan in America. I'm not that fond of that koan because I think it's difficult for most Americans to wrap their head around it. There's another koan that I find much more effective as a breakthrough koan, and that is your original face. And the backstory on that is when the sixth patriarch had been named the sixth patriarch by the fifth patriarch and given the robe and the bowl and told to scram because the monks would be jealous and his life would be in danger if he stuck around. So he headed out, and having lived in the woods all his life, he was pretty good at hiking. And however, as soon as it was discovered that the robe and the bowl were gone, a party of irate monks set out to get it back because they were convinced it was stolen. And they were led by a former general who obviously knew tracking, and he was the one that started to catch up with Huineng, the sixth patriarch, first. And Huineng realized he was about to get accosted, so he put the robe and the bowl on a rock and hid behind a bush. And when Monk Yo came and he saw the robe and the bowl, he tried to pick him up and take him away, and he couldn't lift him. It says something about his psychological state. At some level, obviously, he didn't believe that Huineng really had absconded with him. So instead, he calls out, lay brother, because Huineng had not yet become ordained, and said, I didn't come for the robe and the bowl, I came for the teaching. And so Huineng steps out and says, okay, let's do Zazen for a bit, and then I will teach you. So they did Zazen, and then at a certain point, Huineng said, now, when you were pursuing me, thinking of neither good nor evil, and this is a clue, where then was your original face, the face before your parents were born? So you can see there's a big puzzle here. How can I have a face before my parents were born? I wasn't born yet, if they weren't born yet. And not only that, thinking of neither good nor evil. Anyway, we chew on that for years. Another koan, another breakthrough koan that Hakuin was favored was the sound of one hand. So that's the sound of two hands, that's pretty clear. What's the sound of one hand? And it's important not to get our ideas about things and get fixed into what we think the sound of one hand means. But those are the main breakthrough koans. There's another more modern one, which is, who am I? Which is part of why we come to practice. Most people come to practice because at some level, there's something that's not quite making sense, something that's not quite computing. And it's as if something's missing, something just beyond. And if we could only just reach far enough, we could reconnect with it. That's what I would call an innate koan. And those koans are actually more powerful, usually, than the assigned breakthrough koans. And once a person has had a sufficient breakthrough, and there can be little insights all along the way, but it needs to be a deep enough breakthrough that you've got a depth of understanding that would allow you to work relatively easily with what are called subsequent koans. Then there are hundreds, literally, to hone that insight, deepen it, broaden it, and help you work on what is known as the long maturation, which is bringing to life your understanding in everything you do or say or think. Now, it's important not to take up a koan unless you're working with a teacher, because you can get yourself into trouble that way. You can go down a blind alley and end up in a mind state that it's hard to back out of, because a teacher will have having been through the process themselves, will be able to tell you, hey, you need to turn left there instead of go straight ahead. You need to not go in this direction. There's a difficulty here. You're going to get caught. Here's how to work with it. So there's that to know about koans as well. I hope this helps.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next question, Roshi, is from iPhone, which I think is Retina. She's going to answer your question now. Would you like to show us your video? Are you still there, Retina?
Yeah.
Okay. It says, thank you for such an inspirational talk. Please give us instruction on how to meditate, the right way to meditate. People have such suffering by comparing with each other.
Oh, indeed.
What is the best way to help oneself to work with this suffering?
Okay, the first and foremost thing is to really allow yourself to open to the physical experience, the energy that is the sense of suffering. And it's not about the story, and this is really, really important. It's about the energy that story brings up in you. Because the story, we can go round and round and round and round on stories, but until we tune into our body, where the energy is locked in from the suffering, we cannot really relieve suffering more than put Band-Aids on it. Now, how to do the practice? There are various versions of the awareness practice, and the main one that we use is the extended out breath. And again, whatever practice you're doing, and there are a number that are quite effective, you want to be as present with the experience of the moment as it appears to be as possible. Now, the Susokan, as I said in the very beginning, is very easy to use to barricade yourself against feelings, and you don't want to use it that way. If you find yourself kind of getting straitjacketed in that, then there are a couple of other really effective practices. And one of them is awareness of breath. So you're not trying to extend the out breath necessarily. You're just trying to experience as fully as possible the whole 360-degree experience of breathing out and breathing in. And you pay utmost attention to that, but you don't lock out anything. Another effective practice is to do the same thing with sound. In other words, you're tuning in to even the most subtle sounds in your environment. When we first started this Zoom, you could hear the crickets outside of the Zendo here at Mountain Gate. But they're the subtle waft of wind, the creak of a wall in a house, because houses are always making noise. There's a lot of subtle sound, and it's almost like reach out, let your ears reach further and further and further out to pick up that sound. And again, it's not about locking out anything. It's about what you're focusing on is the experience of the sound. So those are the ways. And there's not one way that's better than another. What works really is what ends up bringing a person to increased awareness and awakening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next one is from Saroja.
Mm-hmm.
When the body dies, where does the energy go?
Aha. Well, there's a koan on that one too. This is a subsequent koan. And the monks say to the master, who's up there in ages, when you die, where you go? What'll happen with you? I mean, it's the same question you just asked. And he responds, I will be a water buffalo at the bottom of the hill. There is Kepler-roshi once said that somebody asked Mitra-roshi a long time ago, because Mitra-roshi's been dead for decades, can a person become reborn as a computer? And he asked some questions about what computers are all about, and then he said, yeah. One of the things about dying is it's vital to be as present as possible with the experience of dying. Our last thoughts are going to propel us into the next incarnation, next rebirth. I can tell you a little bit about somebody that I know who was stabbed in the heart and left for dead, and found soon enough to be able to save his life. And he talked about what that experience was like. He was clinically dead, according to doctors, 6 to 8 minutes. When I met him, it was 16 years later, actually, after that had happened, and he was basically pretty much normal. There were a couple of instances where it was clear that some of the neurological damage had not been 100% recovered or repaired. But basically he was fine, and I met him at Sogenji. He was a friend of the Roshis, and Roshi asked him to give a talk about his experience, and so he did. And he said that when his first recollection was of finding himself in a deep grave, a deep pit. And he's thinking, how the heck am I going to get out of here? And the next thing that happens is that a child is suddenly there with him. And he's thinking, now I got a kid, I got to get out of here too. And then a woman's face appears through the edge of the grave and says, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And the next thing is he finds himself out of the grave and on a kind of a vast plain, and he sees in the distance a group of animals, all of which have horns coming out of their heads. And as soon as he focuses in on them, suddenly he's there among them with a horn growing out of his head. And then the next thing that happens is he's in this incredible meadow filled with flowers and profound peace. And then he wakes up in the hospital. It is really important to die as clear as possible, which is why it is so important to practice deeply before we get to a point where we will die, and to stay as very present as possible through the whole process. I will tell you now about my brother dying. He died about 6 years ago of kind of a surprise cancer, and suddenly it was both the cancer and the fact that he suddenly died when it seemed like it was going to be recovered from were both a surprise, because people in my family didn't get cancer at that age. He's younger than me. And I know that he had been curious about death and dying. He was a doctor, and years ago he asked me, when our mother had already died, and then about quite a few years later our dad died, 10 years later, something like that. And when Dad died, Bill asked me, what does Buddhism say about what happens to you after you die? And I said to him, if you ask yourself that question long enough, you'll find out. So a year later, he says to me, there's nothing you can find out. well, uh, fine. And then several years later, quite a few years later, he gets the cancer and he's dying. He wanted to die clearly present, undrugged. His wife, who was a nurse, told me that she did manage to get a little bit of morphine into his drip, just so he would be reasonably comfortable. But he was obviously quite clear. I found out he was near death only 3 days before he died. And I was on my way to Denver at the time, stopped, pulled over, called, and amazingly he was awake. And we talked for a couple of minutes. And one of the things I said to him was, I'm sorry for all the grief I gave you when we were growing up, because I was 2 years older than him and quite jealous of his position in the family. And he laughed. He just laughed. And obviously it was not a big problem for him. So I went to Denver, I came back. The morning after I arrived back, I get the call as soon as I woke up in the morning from one of my sisters saying that he had just breathed his last. Then what happened next, and I tell you, he was in Virginia, I was in New Mexico. But I am able to tune into people, as people are. I mean, we all have this ability to connect to other people's mind states. It's built in. There's something called mirror neurons in our brain that make this possible. So the first thing that I felt, and I knew it wasn't me, was a sense of sort of slight confusion, a little bit of grief, but nothing heavy, just like, huh? And then that lasted for about 4 hours. Then suddenly it morphed into what I can only describe as luminous transparency. Luminous transparency. Nothing held on to. Everything let go. Just luminous transparency. And when you get into some of the Tibetan teachings, they teach that is the nature of awakening. I have no doubt that my brother had a profound awakening as part of his dying process. And that's one more thing to add, and that is people die at different speeds. You can be considered clinically dead, like Mario, and yet not be dead yet. I just was reasoning about Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche's father, who was also a tulku, which means a reincarnated spiritual teacher in the Tibetan tradition. And when you look at his photograph, he appears to have been an absolutely beautiful, let-go human being, radiates compassion. At any rate, Yongey Mingyur was there when he died, along with his brothers, who were also spiritual leaders too. By the way, it was quite a family. And they said that they didn't even realize he had died. They didn't realize he had stopped breathing because it wasn't obvious. He had, just before he died, he had asked to go to the bathroom, and then he sat himself back on his platform and crossed his legs and started doing zazen, and a few minutes later stopped breathing. But they didn't realize even that he had stopped breathing until a while after that, and his body stayed in that position with that lifelike quality. The color was still there, he didn't turn pale, until on the third day the body kind of collapsed and imploded. But the Tibetans work very hard on practicing for dying and practicing for conscious dying. And some of you may have gotten the email that I sent out to people early on at the beginning of the COVID crisis with a recommendation that people read Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche's book, which I gather you're doing in a book study at TBZ. And it's called In Love with the World, A Monk's Journey Through the Bardos of Living and Dying. And in that book he describes how he was dying and the process of his dying from food poisoning. But he also describes a lot of other things. It's really an excellent book to read. It not only does it help us understand how to work with just the nitty-gritty challenges of life, not to mention the challenges of practice. And also then it speaks to the process of dying, because he was dying. At the last minute, somebody rescued him and put him in a hospital, and he recovered. But he honestly was dying, and it describes that, actually. So hope this helps. Read the book. It's quite inspiring.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think there's one last question.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from Retna.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an afterlife?
Aha. There are people who would say there's got to be, because you have lived so many lives. This is just the one that you may remember. Some people remember many previous lives. I know people like that. And I know I have had some experience with that myself. But it's part of the big question. It's not so much the afterlife. It's how are you going to live this life so that when you reach a point of dying, it will be seamless. There will be no anxiety, no fear. You'll open your arms and welcome it without any negative feeling around it, as my brother did. So it's a question that you really, I wouldn't concentrate on whether there's an afterlife or not. It's more about how to live in this life, because this is the life that will make a difference for future lives, whatever they may be. And the quality of what they will be is going to be determined by how you live this life. The Buddha was asked, what about the future? And he said, look at how you are now. That will determine the future. So, at any rate, thank you all for being part of this. It's wonderful seeing you all. Although I can't see all of you because the screen's not big enough to see.
Well, everybody shows up here. There's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 people here. 3 of them left before, earlier.
Mm-hmm. Well, this
But,
is great.
Yeah, it's a good sized group.
Mm-hmm.
And do we want to say, do you want each person to just say who they are or something? And how did you want to do that? You want to sort of...
Well, we can just, people can just say hello, and it's nice to meet each of you. Some of you already know, but some of you I don't. I'm sorry. Dale, could you get me a drink of water, please? Excuse me, I'm a little bit dry. That's an understatement.
It's easy to be dry in New Mexico.
It is dry, but I also have dry mouth too.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. I truly enjoyed the talk.
Oh,
It
you're
was
welcome.
quite inspirational,
Thank you.
insightful.
And who are you?
My name is Ratna. I been meditating with Shatai for about maybe 6 months.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of Tibetan meditation before. But, as you said, they all are same, going towards the same
Yeah.
goal.
Yep, they are.
Yeah, but I just wanted to ask you, I've been meditating. It's like you said, it's a real struggle every day when you sit.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes I'm not improving. I'm not getting anywhere. It's so slow. Will I ever get there?
Yes,
it just
if you
gives
keep
me
on.
such an anxiety to think like that, and I get discouraged.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand, and I felt like that myself. In fact, years and years and years ago, I was at the Rochester Zen Center living there, and I was suddenly watching everybody I knew were breaking through and starting to work on subsequent koans, and I wasn't. And I kept thinking, this is just not working. What's wrong with me? And I went to one of my friends who had recently broken through, and his wife had too, for that matter. And he said, "Don't worry, it's all cumulative." And he was absolutely right. I didn't really understand exactly what he meant by that, but every breath you pay attention to, every breath you try to pay attention to, every moment you try to be present with as much experience of the moment as possible makes a difference. It adds up. It is cumulative. It's so subtle that we don't necessarily recognize it until there's something that comes along and we realize, wow, I am different. But there was nothing that told us that. So this is why faith is so important in practice, because we have to have faith that we can realize it. And you wouldn't have practiced this long if you didn't have faith. So have faith in that. And another vital aspect of practice is determination. And that's also something you just plug away, plug away, plug away, plug away. You just keep trying your very best in each moment, and it adds up. And then in the middle of that, which is very difficult not to do, is don't bother judging yourself. You can't know. A teacher can tell where a student is at very, very, very accurately. And sometimes when you feel like you're being the worst possible student in the world, you're actually doing very well. So don't bother worrying yourself about those things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I guess.
So, Alex, could we say have some names?
Sure.
People,
Yeah.
So, Alex.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm glad you joined us.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for emailing and inviting us. I'm not sure what to say, but thank you for the talk. I really appreciated it, and
you're welcome.
It's good to hear, and the encouragement is really exciting. It's good because I feel harder to sit with the pandemic.
Yeah.
I've been a lot more thoughts. It's been harder to find quiet moments. So it's just reassuring to hear a lot of this.
Yeah. And one of the things you can do in a busy day, whether there's a pandemic happening or not, is just take one moment. I mean, we all have to go to the bathroom, for example. And just before you go to the bathroom, stop and do one breath. Just be totally present with that one breath. First of all, it's like a micro vacation. Second of all, these things add up. You do these several times a day, and particularly in addition to your regular sitting, and it's amazing. So that's one way you can take the practice deeper, even when it doesn't seem like there's any time to do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have Anita and Lisa.
Uh-huh.
And Saroja.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We have Saroja's. And we have Ellen Madigan up here.
Uh-huh.
Ellen?
I saw Ellen, or at least I saw her name. Let's put it that way. How are the kids, Ellen?
They're fine.
Yeah. How are they dealing with the whole crisis thing?
I think as well as a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old can.
Uh-huh.
You know, my youngest, she's very agitated.
Aw.
You know, and she really misses the social contact
Uh-huh.
and playing with her friends. And my oldest, she doesn't know how she feels sometimes. She can go for long periods of time,
Yeah.
sort of up in her room.
Uh-huh.
She realizes she's lonely, and then she realizes, you know, so it's a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah. Now, have they do they do art or anything to express their feelings?
Yeah, Charlotte draws.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it's really good for her. And B2, I got I was really surprised. She was inspired to make cards for the senior center.
Aw.
Senior center here is collecting food donations and dropping them off, and the first graders are putting cards in.
Oh,
And
great.
she actually got herself to sit still long enough to draw,
Uh-huh.
which I was really shocked. You know,
Yeah.
she really wanted to do it. So,
Yeah.
this pandemic brings out lots of surprising aspects of people that, you know, you think they're one way, and then you're in a completely different circumstance, you know, so you see different things. So
Well, that's great. I love your kids. I hope to see them in March.
I hope so too.
I hope we're all out of jail by then.
Now, that's the problem. The perception of being in jail, yeah?
Yeah.
You know, I read not so long ago about a man who, when he was 10 or 11, was caught in the polio epidemic and ended up in an iron lung. And he's been in an iron lung since then. He's in his 70s. He ended up going to college, becoming a lawyer. And the reason it sort of hit the news is because iron lungs are not exactly being made these days. and his has broken down, and somebody's managed to scrabble another one that they're cannibalizing for parts, and there's an engineer that's sort of keeping him going, but he is joyful. And talk about being in prison. Not only is in prison in an iron lung, he's in prison because his body doesn't work, which is why he has to be in an iron lung. He can't really move on his own. So, and yet he's joyful. So what does he know?
We saw a minute ago, Zhenya, I think how you pronounce it. Is that how you pronounce it, Zhenya? The name? Well, his picture came up, and I guess he doesn't hear us now.
Oh.
And Jay is over here, and he had a question. There's Zhenya. And is that Anna? Okay, they were joined us with us too.
Okay, and the question? Jay's question?
Oh, yes. I was the guy that asked about the koans.
Oh, okay.
How do we work with them? So I just want to say thank you very much for the teaching tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.
I live in Princeton, New
Uh-huh.
Jersey,
Uh-huh.
near Shotai.
Yeah.
And we met through the Princeton Buddhist Meditation Group, which is a Tibetan
Uh-huh.
based group.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm new to Zen Buddhism and feeling very fortunate that I found myself here.
Oh, great. Well, welcome.
So it was a pleasure meeting you, and it was great to be with you all tonight.
Thank you.
He's reading 3 Pillars of Zen right now.
Oh, that has an interesting flavor. It really, when Roshi Kapleau first started teaching in America, he taught the only way he knew, which was through his own experience in Japan. And Yasutani Roshi, his last teacher, was a pretty bombastic guy, and very, in a certain way, kind of dogmatic, to be honest. And that flavor comes out in the 3 Pillars of Zen. I discovered that when I went to live at Sogenji, which is a different lineage and a different set of teachers, that what was coming out of 3 Pillars really was Yasutani Roshi's personality. And that was the same as Kapleau Roshi's personality initially, until he realized that it didn't work so well with Americans. But I hope you were reading the latest edition, which has had some editing by Bowden, who is now the teacher at Rochester.
Okay. I'm not sure, but I'll double check.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
just recognize that, I mean, it's a terrific book. I have met people all over the world that came to practice, even in Japan, came to practice because of that book. And it has some extremely helpful things. I hung on to the Enlightenment experiences for a long time. That's kind of what made me keep going in a certain way, other than the fact that I knew there was no alternative. But then I had to quit reading them because I realized that I was sitting in sesshin with one eye on the practice and the other eye remembering, let's see now, what happened with this guy in this Enlightenment experience? And I must be close. So be careful.
I don't know if I told you, Saroja, you know Connie,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
This Saroja is Connie's mom.
That's what I thought maybe was the case. I was going to ask her.
Yeah, I am Saroja, and I have to thank my daughter to introduce Buddhism to me, and she introduced Shotai to me. So it's all happening in the from last summer.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm coming to practice only this year a little bit seriously, and so it's very interesting to listen to your talk. I just halfway joined your talk, and I'm the one who asked the question about where the life goes after the body dies.
Yeah.
And the astronomers are saying that it is all biological matter. It goes around and it stays in the environment and so things like that. So it's nice to know that it goes somewhere and it enjoys the beauty of the entire universe or something. But like you said, it's focus on this life instead of worrying about afterlife.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And live it full, live it like in the present moment, which is more beautiful than afterlife.
Yeah,
and another thing is, can you explain the breakthrough? You know, I'm not sure about what does it mean by breakthrough.
Oh, breakthrough is a breakthrough our conditioned way of assuming things are, perceiving things are. It's like you could call it an aha moment. It's like suddenly realizing that things are not the way we thought they were. And when we realize that, particularly we realize it in a certain way, which it leads to freedom, because we realize we don't have to be caught in all the old ways of thinking about things, particularly ourselves, of reacting to situations. We can We can be in each moment fresh, which is what Shidobunan was. That's why he didn't have to find it a problem that he was suddenly having this child that he was wrongly accused of fathering. And that is something that every one of us has built in. And we can realize it through the practice.
And then I want to mention Steve, because a lot of these people are new to Steve. Steve and I have been sitting together for like 30 years.
Yeah.
But I want everybody to meet Steve. He's a really long time practitioner.
Yeah. And then it's
Want to say hello, Steve? Can you hear us?
Hello, hi. Yeah, I can. Nice to see everyone, really. A lot of the names I'm familiar with, but I don't have the faces with them. Yeah, hi, Ellen. Yeah, thank you, Roshi.
Oh, you're welcome, Steve. Take care of yourself. I'm glad to hear your mom is still viable. Wow. So.
Yeah, she's.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's home. I mean, she's quarantined. Well, she's at home all the time now, but
yeah,
she has a pretty good sense of humor all the time. She has a good attitude.
Oh,
so
good.
Keeping her.
Yeah, how this thing plays out depends entirely on our attitude. It can be a prison, or it can be a tremendous opportunity for opening into a freedom we never knew we had, but we do. So anyway, it's now after 8 o'clock here, so that means it's now after 10 o'clock with you guys.
After 10, yeah.
Yeah.
I can say hello to Dale in the background.
Yes, you can.
Showtime.
Hi, Dale.
Okay. Oh.
Hi, Steve.
And we have Shingen here too, but I don't think you know Shingen. But anyway, it's been lovely this evening, and we can do this again. Shota, I was thinking maybe trying to do it once a month or something. Let's see how it goes.
That would be wonderful.
And
does everybody like the idea of that?
Yeah.
Have Roshi come back once a month. What do you think about the time? This is, for us, it's a little bit late. For some of us, it's a little bit late. I know that it's way past Ellen's bedtime right now. She tries to go to bed, but when she gets her kids off to bed, so she stayed up late tonight.
Yeah.
But for some people, this time is okay. I think, Jay, it's good for you because you get your baby to bed and you have the freedom.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, and it works for us at this
everybody
end.
okay with starting? Well, we'll try to start at 8 o'clock the next time, and not. You think this is a good time?
Yeah, because
I get a thumbs up from Ellen.
We started late.
A thumbs up from Alex. Great. Everybody else, you feel like this is good? So we'll do it at the same time. And is Tuesday night good for everybody?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look at my schedule because we have Sesshin coming up. So we're going to have to work around that. I wanted also to mention that we do Zazenkai every couple of weeks. The next Zazenkai is Saturday, June 6th. And it runs from Mountain Time here now.
For us, it's 11 o'clock. It starts at 11 and goes to 2 for the first session. Second session picks up at 3 and ends at 6.
Yeah. And I do Teisho the second session and a beginning talk in the morning. So, and you're sitting with other people. So there's that. And then, of course, well, our evening Zooms are kind of crossing paths with yours. So I don't know how that
I
would
come
work.
on at 8 o'clock, and when somebody comes on at 9, then I just leave and go over to the group that's come on at 9.
Mm-hmm. So, okie doke. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank you very much.
being
Thank
here.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
practice.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you,
really
Roshi.
important in this time.
Are you still there? Okay.
I am, yeah. Good night.
Good night.
I need to know what to do about this. If you can stay on for a minute, because I need to know what I do about this stuff I recorded. I don't know when the one is still recording, but I don't know where it goes after I've got I've got this quick time on here. So
Oh, you didn't record on the Zoom?
No, because I made you host, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't record on Zoom since I wasn't the host anymore.
Okay. Well,
I tried.